Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Today, as we share stories and knowledge, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Hello and good evening, Sydney. My name is Lucky Price, and I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our speaker today. Janet Mock is an author, activist, advocate, and a feminist intent on tackling stigma through storytelling. The host of the conversation series Never Before, a contributing editor and columnist for Allure, Janet broke ground in 2014 with the release of her first book, Redefining Realness, a pioneering and profound memoir which was the first biography written from the perspective of a young trans person, and it debuted on the New York Times bestseller list that year. A native Hawaiian, Janet attended the University of Hawaii at Manoa and earned her MA in journalism from New York University. Janet began her career at People.com and has since worked as a correspondent for Entertainment Tonight, a contributing editor for Marie Claire magazine, and a host for MSNBC, where she helmed the groundbreaking series So Popular. Janet also produced the HBO documentary The Trans List and is an executive producer for upcoming MSNBC series Beyond My Body. Released this year, Janet's second book, Surpassing Certainty, is a self-portrait of a young woman searching for purpose and place in the world, without a roadmap to guide her forward. It has been described as a defining chronicle of strength and spirit, brimming with liberated self-discovery. On January 21st this year, Janet addressed millions on stage at the Women's March on Washington, where she urged for an intersectional and inclusive movement that included all women: trans women, undocumented people, sex workers, and people of disability. Janet's story has resonated with people all over the world, not just trans women, but people from a spectrum of gender diversity. 2014 was the year that Janet released Redefining Realness. It was also the year that I began my transition from a girl named Eliza into the person that stands here today. I was a late bloomer. It took me 33 years to come to terms with my own gender identity and to then actually take action to affirm it. I was terrified, elated, confused, and clear, and I had absolutely no idea where to start. Like many, I did not have a lot of trans people in my life, and I had no idea how to begin to articulate what I was feeling. So I did what every good millennial does in crisis. I Googled. Once I pushed past the salacious, the schlock, the sideshow oddity, I found people sharing intimate stories of their personal journey to truth. Amongst them, I found Janet Mock. In 2011, Janet wrote a coming out article for Marie Claire. It was revealing, brave, and powerful. Reading this article gave me confidence that there was life on the other side, that if I dared to dream big, that the hurdles before me, which felt absolutely insurmountable, could be traversed. Janet allayed my fear of never being loved when she talked about the love she found with her husband Aaron. Janet and other advocates like her saved my life. Through their visibility, I found my strength. Janet Mock helped me to redefine my realness, without which I would not be Lucky Price, a husband to my darling wife Emma, a father to sweet little Bertie, celebrating my first Father's Day today. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm a proud trans man. Ladies, non-binaries, and gents, here to share stories of her life, her work, and her mission to broaden society's portrait of womanhood, please welcome the Antidote, Janet Mock. Thanks, darling.
Can I upstage me?
Yeah, I'm trying to upstage you.
So our session is done. Thank you, Lucky. I'm just kidding. What a beautiful introduction. I don't think I could have asked for anything more affirming of my work and my existence. I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for inviting me to be a part of this year's Antidote Festival. It's an honor to share this space with all of you today. As a Black and Native Hawaiian trans woman, I know our struggle for liberation to be global and deeply connected, and I cannot discuss the oppression of Black trans folk without talking about our connections to Aboriginal people here in Australia, Maori folks in New Zealand, Native Indigenous Americans, and my own Kanaka Maoli community in Hawaii. The parallels between Indigenous and Black folk is obvious to me as someone who comes from both communities. I see clearly how our communities have been displaced, how we've navigated social and economic inequalities, policing, surveillance, and mass incarceration, as well as how we've resisted against continual erasure of our history, our traditions, and our contributions. I also know that the struggle for Indigenous people and for Black people must include Indigenous trans people and Black trans people. I am only here because of the work of those who put their bodies on the line to fight for self-determination and the elimination of societal forces that impede on our collective liberation. Our movements must remove structural inequities that prioritize some bodies, white bodies, cis bodies, able bodies, deeply pocketed bodies over others. There are many ways to go about doing this work, and I do my small part by wielding my pen and my body like a weapon against racism, against sexism, transphobia, ableism, and the erasure of Indigenous people. I truly believe that telling our stories, first to ourselves and then to one another and ultimately to the world, is a revolutionary act. And my activism began with me sitting down at my desk to tell myself my own story. This seems like an incredibly simple task and act, but when you grow up in a culture like I did, that is intent on silencing and erasing, shunning and shaming, marginalizing and exiling, you realize that that act is not so simple. Yet, writing myself onto the page, onto the shelf, and onto this stage is an act I did not do alone. If it weren't for writers like Audre Lorde and Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, and Zora Hurston, I would not be here. If it weren't for trans activists like Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and Miss Major Griffin Gracie, I would not be here. And if it weren't for my grandmothers, I wouldn't be here. It was around my grandmother Shelley's kitchen table in Dallas, Texas, where I learned about the injustices she faced as a Southern Black woman who worked as a seamstress to provide for my father and his 4 siblings. It was around my grandmother Pearl's kitchen table in Honolulu where I learned about the injustices she faced as an Indigenous Hawaiian woman who worked at an elementary school to support my mother and her 5 siblings. Collectively, these women taught me to be a feminist without ever saying the word feminist. These women taught me to be intersectional in my politics without ever saying the word intersectional, a very important feminist concept established by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. In 1989, Crenshaw identified a long-standing problem in the legal system. Black women were not truly being seen. We were able to see Black men, we are able to see Black men and recognize the racism that they face. We're able to see women, particularly white women, and recognize the sexism that they face. But we are often unable to see Black women and recognize the compounding effects of racism and sexism that we face. So Crenshaw used a simple analogy of a Black woman at an intersection to help us better see her. She is both Black and female and positioned precisely in the middle of the intersection, exactly where the roads overlapped and met, impacted both by her gender and her race. She does not experience her gender and race separately. She experiences her race and gender simultaneously. And many of us are positioned similarly, impacted not just by our gender and race, but our class, ability, sexuality, religion, and so many other facets of our identities and experiences. Intersectionality upholds our lived realities and recognizes how our identities complicate and create levels of systemic injustice and marginalization. Without this framing, we are in danger. We are in danger of squashing and reducing one another's experiences and erasing the specificity of our lived, unique experiences. I first stepped forward, as Lucky mentioned, publicly to share my experience 6 years ago in Marie Claire magazine. I was born in the 1980s in Honolulu, Hawaii, to a mother who was a teen mother, with 2 sisters who were teen mothers, and a father who struggled with addiction. I grew up the middle of 5 kids in communities plagued by poverty and low-resource schools, over-policing, and drugs. I came of age, seeing gay people on television, learning about the AIDS crisis, and witnessing firsthand the plight of my neighbors. Low-income people of color, from undocumented Filipino domestic workers and Black men under heavy surveillance to indigenous Hawaiians displaced on their own land. If growing up Black and Native and poor wasn't enough, I also had my own identity struggles as a trans kid. As a young person, I struggled deeply and fought hard to be myself, reveal myself, express myself in a culture that mandates from the very beginning, before you're even here, that if you're born with certain body parts, you're not allowed to express who you truly are if that expression doesn't align with what those around you deem normal and within the binary. Growing up, I had a series of battles with my parents, from choosing to wear my hair long, to having both my ears pierced, to sitting in a corner quietly reading books instead of being outside with a football. As a young person, I was acutely aware and uncomfortable with the fact that I was different. And I tried my best to appease my parents and make them feel good about my existence, and also my family and my peers, by hiding deeper into myself and masking my truth. Then in the 7th grade, I met my best friend, Wendy, who would consider herself a goddess, but she was more of a queen. And she, I have to respect the way she self-identifies. She was a 12-year-old trans girl who had a green bob and wore short shorts with knee-high socks, and she pranced around our school as if she ruled it. Wendy's fearlessness and her boldness to be fully herself, no matter the consequence, pushed me to proclaim what I secretly knew about myself all along, but I was so scared to say, that I was a girl. Wendy and I became best friends. We'd stay up late talking about everything and nothing, and I had butterflies in my stomach for having found someone with whom I didn't have to explain anything to. She just knew me. And my friendship with Wendy, my friendship with her, has taught me that authenticity and living my truth was the only possible pathway. And she encouraged me to no longer present in a way that made everyone else comfortable. Instead, she urged me to present in a way that made me comfortable. So on my first day of high school, I strutted on campus in tight jeans, a cropped t-shirt, and my wild curls bouncing that I had learned to straighten, and reintroduced because of Beyonce, and reintroduced myself as Janet to my classmates. And relaying this now, I marvel at my teenage self, that 15-year-old girl with the unwavering sense of self who never let anyone's perceptions of her make her doubt who she knew she was inside. And I believe, and I know that self-assuredness was the key to my survival, enabling me to transition through the halls of my high school, despite teachers who blocked the entrance to the girls' room, despite faculty members who called me by my birth name and the wrong pronouns. Despite their intolerance and ignorance, I persevered. And I left high school with a scholarship to college, becoming the first in my family to even go to college. And I entered the University of Hawaii in 2001, weeks before September 11th. And my peers were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and we later experienced the Great Recession just as we took on tens of thousands in student loan debt. We began to broadcast our lives and our politics and our selfies on Facebook and Twitter. Hey, selfies are revolutionary too. We became more connected and aware and engaged in social movements, from the election of the first Black president to Arab Spring and Black Lives Matter. I belong to a generation that is far more connected, socially conscious, and aware and diverse. And I like to think of us as the most woke generation. And being a part of this generation is largely why I committed early on to telling stories that matter. As a student reporter in Hawaii, I spent much of undergrad asking people questions, listening to their stories, offering them space to tell their truth. I learned as a student reporter that we all want to be heard, and we all yearn to be seen for who we really are, no matter our path. This is a universal truth. Telling our stories allows us to connect with one another, but more importantly, it allows us to connect with ourselves. And I knew that telling stories was what I wanted to do with my life. So I moved to New York City in 2005 for graduate school without family resources or a backup plan. I borrowed $40,000 in student loan debt that I'm still paying off. So this engagement is really helping me. Thank you so much, Sydney Opera House. And I got my master's at NYU. And in New York, after years of standing out, I made the decision to keep the fact that I was trans to myself. And it was liberating to be seen as another girl in the crowd, another 22-year-old just figuring out who she was. And it was the first time in my life when I was free to just be me, without people whispering about me, without my transness leading the way for me. And with that privilege of unmarked existence, the privilege of normal, I gained access and I was let in. I learned about writing from our nation's best journalists. I got internships at magazines I had read in my bed growing up. I earned my master's and became an editor at People magazine. I swore with my curls and my cosmopolitans in New York City that I was the second coming of Carrie Bradshaw. And this was the dream. This was the American dream. I was someone who came from nothing, someone who made something out of nothing. I became someone. But I was also deeply fearful and anxious and afraid about publicly claiming a part of my identity that was so heavily misunderstood and could lead me to further marginalization. I thought to myself at the time, why would anyone want to attach themselves publicly to a group of people who are told that they're confused, who are told that they're an abomination, who are legally mandated not to use public restrooms or to serve in the military, who in more than 30 states in the United States can still be legally fired and denied housing for being themselves, and who, like the hundreds of trans women around the globe killed annually, are being hunted down for being who they are. I felt, and I learned, and I believed that I was less than. I felt that maybe my voice wasn't worth hearing because I saw no one like me on my television screen, on my bookshelves, who was celebrated, who was applauded, who was centered. But eventually I came to a point where I realized at 26 that how people saw me had nothing to do with me. It had to do with them and their limitations, their prejudice, their own ignorance. And as I basked in my own personal success, I couldn't ignore the fact that my success and my experience was completely outside the norm for girls growing up like I did. I couldn't ignore the fact that there were girls and young women like myself who didn't have my privileges, from the way that I present, the way that I look, to my educational access, citizenship, medical access, and able-bodiedness. Therefore, they could not access the same resources that I had benefited from. Many of my sisters and siblings are grappling with homelessness, joblessness, a lack of access to healthcare and education, and these interconnected issues and this space of lack often pushes them to underground economies that make them even more vulnerable. These were the urgent, vital issues that pushed me to step forward with my own stories and begin challenging the way our stories are told. And I found such strength to join this movement through the work and words of writers who came before me, who spoke their truth, who didn't apologize for existing and taking up space in the world. Black women writers saved my life. Zora Neale Hurston, and Maya Angelou, and Barbara Smith, and Toni Morrison, and Audre Lorde offered me refuge and reflection. Even today, I still turn to Audre Lorde's words, and she urged me when I was so afraid to transform my silence into language and action without erasing the complicatedness of visibility. She wrote, "In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear. But most of all, we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. For that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable, is that which also is the source of our greatest strength." Choosing to tell my story emboldened me, giving me visibility and voice, allowing me to help shift conversations about living at the intersections of gender, race, and class, conversations about how restrictive gender norms oppress us all, conversations about the importance of representation. Ultimately, I yearned to champion our freedoms to define and declare who we are. Trans women are women, trans men are men, and trans people are exactly who they say they are. That's not up for debate. Yeah, you can applaud to that. Most important, I told my story because I yearned to tell the truth, to create the story that I didn't have growing up, and to show girls growing up like I did that they are worthy and deserving of all the things this world has to offer. And I'm wholly committed to combating ignorance, prejudice, and stigma through storytelling on multiple platforms. I wrote my first memoir, Redefining Realness, in 2014, the first memoir written from the perspective of a young trans person. 3 years later, I followed up my story with Surpassing Certainty, my latest book, which centered on the years in my life when I was not open about my transness. I've been able to share grilled cheese and tell my story to Oprah Winfrey, who I know is apparently a great export here, a national treasure that has come here and has had her O on the bridge. I've been able to create space for others in my community to tell their stories, specifically through my HBO documentary, The Trans List. And I've been able to interview luminaries from Maxine Waters and Laverne Cox to pop culture powerhouses like Nicki Minaj and problematic fave Kim Kardashian West. And I've been able to address millions at the Women's March on Washington. I am so lucky, I'm so lucky to do what I do, but the great irony of my success is that it often deludes many into believing that my success is possible for all those growing up like I did. And the reality is, it is not yet. Just because I made it doesn't mean that others are able to do the same. Many trans people, specifically those from low-income communities of color, are invisibilized and ignored. We as a society, deep down, are afraid of difference, so we push those who are unlike us away from our scope of vision. We need to begin acknowledging that trans women are women, that Black, brown, and Native bodies matter, that trans girls and women of color are worthy of our protection and care. And I do this work now, walking in the footsteps of giants who came before me, who were beaten, jailed, and killed in pursuit of rights that have allowed me to stand on this stage. I follow the revolutionary work of my foremothers, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, who hustled the streets of New York City to take care of their own. Sylvia and Marsha helped ignite the Stonewall riots in 1969, fighting the police and the policing of their identities and lives. They were instrumental in the burgeoning LGBT movement. They raised their voices, they pounded the pavement, they yelled and roared for themselves and one another. They also refused to let anyone silence them, not even white, gay, and lesbian activists who tried to exclude them from the movement that they created. Our history as trans and queer people of color fighting against poverty, against policing, against brutality, against hunger, against racism and misogyny and HIV/AIDS is deep. We have deep roots in active resistance, as demonstrated in the events at Stonewall, where it was gender nonconforming people and street youth and drag queens and trans folk of color like Sylvia and Marsha who have and have always been on the front lines. And each space where I'm invited to speak, I give the stage over to trans activist and LGBT pioneer Sylvia Rivera. This is a video from 1973 at the Christopher Street Liberation Rally in New York City. It's a few years after Stonewall. Sylvia's only 22 years old, and she's bombarded the stage to speak.
I've been trying to get up here all day for your gay brothers and your gay sisters in jail that write me every motherfucking week and ask for your help. And you all don't do a goddamn thing for them. Have you ever been beaten up and raped in jail? Now think about it. They've been beaten up and raped after they haven't spent much of their money in jail to get their cell phones and tried to get their sex change. The women have tried to fight for their sex changes or to become women of the women's liberation. And they write STAR, not the women's group. They do not write women. They do not write men. They write STAR because we're trying to do something for them. I have been to jail. I have been raped and beaten many times by men, heterosexual men that do not belong in the homosexual shelter. But do you do anything for them? No. You all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I will not longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. I do not believe in a revolution, but you all do. I believe in the gay power. I believe in us getting our rights, or else I would not be out there fighting for our rights. That's all I wanted to say to your people. If you all want to know about the people that are in jail, and do not forget Bambi Lamore and Dora Marks, Kenny Messner, and other gay people that are in jail, come and see the people at Star House on 12th Street, on 640 East 12th Street, between B and C, apartment 14. The people that are trying to do something for all of us, and not men and women that belong to a white middle class, white club. And that's what you all belong to. Revolution now! Give me a G! Give me an A! Give me a Y! Give me a P! Give me an O! Give me a W! Give me an E! Give me an R! Gay power! Louder gay power!
Mother of the movement, right? I love this video so much. It's any time that I am feeling doubtful about what to say, whenever I'm feeling as if I'm going to try to make my speeches or my remarks, specifically when I'm talking to white audiences, more palatable, I just listened to Sylvia and I'm like, no, bitch. Just go in. And so what I love so much about this video, specifically as a learning tool, right, is that she's entering a space that does not want her, does not want to hear from her, does not want her to exist. She's literally, before this even goes on, she's like fighting people and snatching the microphone because they did not want to slate, at the time, what they called drag queens or anyone that was gender nonconforming into the gay liberation kind of rally and march. And she goes, no, 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 no. We helped start this, right? And you want to put us on the back burner and tell us that we should just wait for our rights. And I think about how right now what she's doing at the end of that, actually, she then has them all chanting with her because they get read for filth, right, for all of their privilege and the ways in which they use their whiteness and their money and all this stuff to oppress trans folk of color and gender nonconforming people. And I just love that she shares her story. She goes up to share her story, and she's raging against her community, a community that she's gone to jail for, that she's fought the police for, that she's walked the front lines for. And she's yelling at them for caring only about the most privileged. She's unapologetic about her life as a trans Latina who has been incarcerated, who's engaged in sex work, who's been sexually assaulted. And what saddens me is that though in this current moment we have so much more visibility, so many more trans bodies to consume and stories to hear and tell and watch, not a lot has changed for my sisters and siblings. Often in spaces, specifically in feminist spaces, you know, where we center conversations about girls and women, my sisters and I are excluded. When well-meaning people say that they're fighting on behalf of or advocating for the protection of girls and women, they're usually talking about a very specific girl. That girl is usually not trans. She is usually perceived to be straight. She is usually respectable. She hasn't engaged in sex work. She is virtue. She is blonde. She is as close to whiteness as possible. If she checks these boxes, she's the one that people rally behind. And it's so rare for us to rally behind trans girls and women. We are among the most vulnerable and invisibilized populations. My sisters are grappling with homelessness and joblessness, a lack of access to healthcare and education, and these issues push them out of hostile homes and out of intolerant schools and into detention homes and prisons and deeper into poverty. And these interconnected issues also push them into underground economies like sex work, which is often the default method unto which Black trans women earn the money to nurture themselves with food, with medicine, clothing, and shelter, basic resources that we collectively do not provide for them. This dangerous, stigmatized work makes them even more vulnerable to HIV. Trans women are among the most at-risk demographic, as well as the most likely to face medical discrimination. And trans women of color are more likely to be profiled, incarcerated, and targets of abuse and violence. These girls, my sisters, stand at the intersection of race, gender, and class on the margins of our society. And because women are not valued, because trans people are invalidated, and because people of color are exiled, trans women of color live at the intersection of pass her by and pay her no mind. And we have our work cut out for us. And creating the world we want for girls and women and for all of us starts with our own openness to embracing girls and women and people from all walks of life. Girls like Cece McDonald, a 24-year-old who survived a white supremacist and anti-racist assault on her body only to be prosecuted and jailed for daring to survive. Girls like China Gibson, a 31-year-old who was shot dead in the streets of her hometown in New Orleans, Louisiana in February. Girls like Elon Nettles, a 21-year-old who was beat to death in my own neighborhood in Harlem, just across the street from the police station. No one did anything for her in 2013. Girls like Erica King Thompson, a trans woman who is currently incarcerated in a men's facility by the state of New York only to be verbally, physically, and sexually abused by inmates and sergeants in addition to being denied medical attention for her injuries and forced into solitary confinement. This is cruel and unusual punishment. These girls and countless others have been beaten and jailed, extinguished and exiled because they are girls and women, because they are Black girls and women, because they are Black girls and women who are trans. And as I relay all of these injustices, I have to acknowledge the resilience of my community. When you have never been centered, when you have been given nothing, when no one expects anything from you, you learn to cope, to create, to move, to organize, and to resist in deeply impactful ways. These are the people that I come from. This is the miracle of my community. And I think about the thousands of trans women choosing to live visibly despite threats and risk, some of whom have shared their stories through the hashtag Girls Like Us, which I established in 2012 to build community among trans women. I met some of my best friends through that hashtag. Or the hundreds of readers of my book who told their stories through my I Am Redefining Realness story sharing campaign. But these stories will not save us alone. We have to be conscious. We have to remember. We have to never forget the interlaying, complicated nexus at which trans people of color exist. We must never forget that whole communities of low-income trans and LGBTQ plus people were fighting for their lives at Stonewall and continue to fight today. We must never forget that the legacy of survival and resistance is deep in our community and that it goes beyond the shallow soundbite of equality for all. We must be conscious and realize that queer and trans folk exist in joblessness and homelessness, that our siblings are still fighting HIV/AIDS, that our sisters are banished to the darkness of street corners, that our people are still being hunted down and locked away, and that trans women of color are being killed globally. It's a state of emergency. And in the world that I see, trans girls, like all girls and young people, are protected and nurtured. They are included in conversations about violence against women and HIV prevention and reproductive rights. They have access to schools and women's colleges and restrooms. They have access to unbiased, knowledgeable, and affordable healthcare. They no longer fall in between the gaps of feminist, racial justice, and LGBT movements. They are centered. They are centered because they matter and they're here. They are centered because our own liberation lies in their well-being and survival. Each of us must fight for the creation of a world where we all have the right to define our identities, express ourselves without threat or fear, and make decisions regarding our lives and our bodies without political, medical, or religious interference. And we can only do this work together by realizing that our oppressions are not isolated and our freedom is linked to one another. We must be vigilant about being intentional, inclusive, and intersectional. We must center those who are underrepresented, who are often not heard, who are not in the rooms where decisions are made. We must center those most marginalized, those who are multiracial and trans, gender nonconforming and disabled, queer and undocumented, who have families behind bars and threatened by borders, who are Native and Indigenous. We do not center them solely for their benefit. We center the most marginalized because it's the only way we will ever get free. Tonight, I charge you to extend beyond yourself and include my sisters and siblings in your work. I charge you to show up for one another and to use your voice and your access to ignite change in your communities. I charge you to be courageous and conscious as we struggle together and struggle with one another. Thank you.
Join me. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
I'm going to start with saying aloha, Janet Mock.
Aloha.
So you're a native Hawaiian. I wore my favorite Hawaiian shirt for you today.
It
Thank
looks
you.
good. It's nice and bright.
I'm a wannabe visibility, high visibility. There we go. So I am a wannabe Hawaiian. My wife and I have spent a lot of time in Hawaii.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How far is it from here?
It's about 8 hours. Is that right?
Oh,
yeah.
That's
I might
close.
be making that up a little. Maybe it's 10.
Okay.
Yeah, but it goes like that because you're so excited. One thing amongst many that really struck a chord with me about beautiful Hawaiian culture is the practice of aloha. So the word aloha is used obviously as a greeting and a farewell and an expression of love. But I've learnt that the word actually means a lot more. Aloha is actually a way of life. Aloha holds within it all one needs to know to interact rightfully in the natural world.
That's beautiful.
The idea of aloha is that you are greeting the world with the intention to be your best self. And Janet, I think you are the absolute embodiment of aloha.
Oh, thank you.
So,
is all we're going to do is just compliment me?
I know.
I'm
just going to sit here and go, Janet, I'm a total fangirl. I'm totally the wrong person to do this. And so we should start this right. My name is Lucky. My preferred gender pronouns are he and him. So I think that's a great place to start. Janet, what made the 27-year-old decide to come forward into visibility and to quote yourself, to speak yourself into existence? What was the tipping point for you that went, okay, now is the time to stand up? I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it was a mix of a few things. One was boredom. I had, I just wanted to spice things up, make it interesting. I had been sitting in a cubicle for the past 5 years, working at a magazine, which was an entertainment magazine about famous people. And I had spent a huge chunk of my 20s telling the stories of very famous people, and it's really easy to hide behind very famous people because no one's interested in me. And I think that it was really fun for the first couple of years, and after a while, I think I felt unfulfilled. And I knew that I had this story and these experiences that I hadn't even sat down to tell myself yet. And so at around 25 years old, after a really bad breakup, I got really emo and listened to a lot of John Mayer and went to movies by myself, started a blog. I was really searching, It was like my Eat, Pray, Love in New York City. And I began to just sit with myself in the mornings and wake up a couple hours early before work to just sit with myself and journal. And my commitment was to just sit there and start telling myself my own stories. And so I started doing that. And then also simultaneously what was happening was that, at least in America, there were these these things happen in trends, story trends happen. I know as a journalist, this happens all the time. Trans, is something that America is talking about now, and therefore a lot of other people are talking about it. But in 2011, what was going on was that there were a lot of LGBT youth suicides and bullying. The story of Tyler Clementi was one that was told nationally. It was on the cover of our magazine, and I thought that though I was seeing all these stories, but though we say LGBT, we often mean cisgender, gay, and lesbian youth, right? And I was noticing that there was no representation of what it looks like to be a young trans person. And I was thinking, it's kind of like that Toni Morrison thing where she says, if there's a story that you want to read and it hasn't been written, then you need to go write it. Yeah. And so that was what pushed me. So it was all of those factors. It was wanting to feel challenged, wanting to be useful, wanting to contribute, and also wanting to just tell the truth. I had for so long not told myself the truth or withheld that and held it so close. And I felt that I needed to kind of open up a little bit.
Terrifying and liberating.
Completely.
How can actually I should, before I go on, guys, there are microphones either side here, and we'd love to, Antidote is all about you guys asking questions. So please stand up and make your way to the microphones, and we've got some time to hear some questions from the audience. How can other girls use the notion of speaking themselves into existence as a mantra to see themselves and not feel erased or alienated?
How can they use the notion of, say that again?
How can other girls use the notion of speaking themselves into existence as a mantra to see themselves and not feel erased or alienated? I mean, the space that exists, particularly for trans women of colour, there is absolutely no visibility. And you were beginning this story, but it's for so many trans women of colour, the decision to become visible is at the risk of violence.
Yeah. And so I think that the number one piece of advice I would say to ensure that you feel as protected and nurtured and that you're well-resourced. And when I say well-resourced, I'm not just talking about food, housing, shelter, and all that stuff. I'm talking about ensuring that you have people around you, a gang of folk, your community who are there for you, who are affirming you, who are nurturing you, who will, smack a bitch if things get wrong, Just make sure you have your people so that you feel well-armed in this world that is often trying to come for you. And then I think at the next level of that is, I think that you start small. That's how I started. I started just by sitting down with my journal and writing to myself. I was not thinking about an audience, was not thinking about a book deal, was not thinking about the public. I was just thinking about, I want to sit here and talk to myself. And that then made me feel safe enough to then share that with my partner, my best friend. And then they were like, there's something here. And I was like, yeah, there is, right? And then it was like, then I created a book proposal. And then it became big. But at first, it really just started with the act of telling myself the truth, and that was enough. And also to not feel pressured in this moment of grand visibility that we're having with transness in particular, to feel as if that you owe anything to the world. Your existence alone, your walking through the streets every single day, in your Black, in your Latina, in your trans girl body is enough. That is activism alone. By taking up space and unapologetically living your truth, that is activism enough. Now, if you want to go to the next layer and contribute in a way that's public, that puts your body on the line, that's a decision that you have to know those risks of course. But, and of course we want you there, but don't feel obligated in this moment to have to step up in that kind of way. There's other ways to step up as well.
I have a friend.
I think we have a...
Oh, we have a friend over here. Oh, I can't even see what's over there.
I know.
Okay, fantastic. Number one.
Hi, Janet. My name's Kate Doak.
Kate, Twitter friend, yes.
With each other on Twitter quite a bit before. I've worked in the media previously and also with the national program Safe Schools Coalition Australia. And with what you've been talking about so far tonight in regards to writing yourself into existence, can you expand upon that and also the importance of the concept of language itself, like how we describe ourselves in this day and age and what impact that can have both on ourselves and also the movement going forward?
I wholly believe in something that Bell Hooks wrote, which is that language is a place of struggle. I think that it's a starting place. I think that us being able to have labels and words and, language to be able to describe ourselves and our experience is a starting point, but it's also not everything, right? I think that so often to position myself in a space, I'm often using words, right? But then there's a lot of words to describe me. And so it's like not making sure that I'm not prescribing to just the one word that most people are interested in, which oftentimes when I'm invited into spaces, it's my transness. It's not my Blackness. It's not me being Native Hawaiian. It's not having grown up poor, having engaged in sex work as a teenager. So I have to make sure that I bring all of that language and all of that words in to kind of complicate and add nuance and layers to the story I choose to tell about myself. And so I always try to push other people to ensure that they do not just reduce themselves to one part of their identity, that they bring all of the things there, because people will do that already for you. Even if I say 20 things that I am, they're still just going to say trans. Like they will not. And so it's interesting and so a lot of that stuff has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what they feel is a priority to them about my story that they think is important. I feel like I kind of answered that question, but maybe not.
I think you did. Thank you for the question, Kate.
Hi, Janet. I've been following you for a long time now, so I know a bit about your work. But I think last month or 2 months ago, I saw your interview at the Breakfast Club, which is a different space to talk about.
That was so well put.
A different space to talk about trans rights and stuff, and the backlash of that, the response of that, what happened the following day, I think, with Little Duval or something, making fun about trans women, calling them men, etc. How do you then get the courage to return to similar spaces like that to educate people about trans?
Yeah, so just for people who don't understand, the Breakfast Club is a hip-hop radio show in New York City, and it was the last stop on my promo tour, my media tour for my book, and it was an important space for me to be in because heavily it's a people of color space. It's hip-hop community, and it has deep roots within Black and Latino neighborhoods, and a lot of the women I talk about, a lot of my sisters, my community is Black and Latino girls. And so I wanted to ensure that I came into that space and that I did my meditation, I did my, I had all my things ready before I went there, like anything that I go and do. And so they asked a lot of questions. I knew it would be a lot of one-on-one. It's a space where there's not often trans or LGBT people in that space. And so I was prepared. And so I did that work. We did the interview. I moved on. I was like, it's done. And then they brought me into another conversation with some random person who I'd never heard of. And they asked him a question about, if a trans woman was with you and she didn't tell you that she was trans, what would you do? And they propped up my book and they said, what about her? And then he said something like, I would kill her, basically. And so it speaks to the layers, to the complicatedness of disclosure of trans women in partnership with cisgender men. Trans women have always been desired, but it's always been shameful and secret. They've been pushed to corners and darkness, and a lot of the violence that we talk about around trans women of color is largely happening not through some random stranger on the street that's throwing something at them, though that is a part of it, but oftentimes it's domestic, intimate partner violence that then leads a lot of these partners as a part of their defense to say that she tricked me, when overwhelmingly they had already known, they had previously had sex with this woman before and all these things, but it's that trans panic defense thing. And so a part of the work that I think was necessary in being in that space was knowing that now it helped launch conversations around this that was deeply triggering, but also I think it also added a lot of necessary energy that needed to be said and put on in terms of this conversation around disclosure, trans womanhood, and dating cisgender men. But in terms of how I deal with the resistance of being in quote-unquote hostile or not as welcoming spaces, I prepare myself. It's a part of the work that I have to do. If I want to challenge conversations, I can't just be in ones where folk are comfortable with my existence, and I make sure I take care of myself with my self-care, with my people, with my communities before I enter a space like that. But it's a part of the work.
As we're moving towards the end of our conversation...
Oh my God, that went so fast.
I know. You talk so much. Such great words. I wanted to ask you...
Oh, wait, no, we have someone else.
Oh, no, we have someone else.
Yeah.
I can't see anything. Forgive me, thank you. Standing in the shadows, come into the light.
Into the light. Yeah. Hey, in terms of talking about people prescribing adjectives and trying to control the conversation you're trying to tell, how do you stop from being exhausted of educating and redirecting every conversation happening about you?
Never ends. No answers there. I'm just kidding. Keep going.
That's pretty much it. Like, how do you cope with people trying to control the conversation that you're wanting to tell and the stories that you're trying to tell?
I think it's even. Of course, there's a self-care piece before you even go into a space like that. I think the next layer of that is being really clear about what you know to be the truth and what you know to be right. And for me, at least, that helps me to ensure that I'm not wavering and also then making sure that I'm listening in that space as well and seeing what people are really trying to ask me or what they're really trying to say and using their own words and their own limitations and their own gaps in understanding and their ignorance as a tool to teach them. But, this labor that I think that a lot of marginalized people have to kind of do, don't have to do, but that a lot of us choose to do in terms of the movement work. But in terms of being exhausted, I think that it's I leave any space where I'm having to talk about my life or my communities and try to get people to, become conscious partners. I leave empty and depleted, and you have to make sure that when you leave empty and depleted that you go to spaces where no one expects for you to show up, except that you showing empty and depleted is more than enough, and they love you, and they re-energize you. And so for me, that's kind of the cycle. It's like I take care of myself, I go and do the work. I'm also being media trained helps too if you're doing media work around that kind of stuff too, which is, you can get trained around that stuff. But yeah.
I think we have another from this lovely folk over here.
Hi there. One of the things that I love about you is that you openly fangirl over artists like Janet Jackson and Beyonce. So I'd like to know what your favorite Janet Jackson song and video is.
Very important. I'm seeing Janet Jackson's Return to the Stage.
I'm going to the US for that myself.
Wait, where are you going?
To Providence and to New Hampshire.
Oh, amazing. I'm going to the Hollywood Bowl. I'm very excited to see her in LA. My favorite Janet Jackson song, oh my God. I think it would be Let's Wait a While, because I feel like that was like one of the ones when I was like younger. I was just, it was very like, kind of virginity stuff. So it has a very special place in my heart. And then all of Velvet Rope. I think Velvet Rope was just a huge turning point. Like without Janet, Beyonce, Rihanna, all these girls would not exist because she just plowed through in terms of the pop space and, doing sickening tours, and I cannot wait to see her with the State of the World tour, which sounds very heavy, but yeah. Of course.
Thank you.
I think we have another one right
Do we have another? There we go. Excellent.
Hi,
Number
Janet.
one.
I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person. I just want to say welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I read your book, The Existence one, the one before this one, and I really enjoyed your book. But I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about intersectionality, and you said that women of colour, and especially trans women of colour, are at that border of intersectionality, and you can't move because of the political determinants and the social determinants that impact on our lives. And as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, sexuality and gender diverse woman, I know that intersectionality. But I guess, how did you move from that and go into your degrees and then move from you did law, didn't you? And then come into a writer? Because it's powerful.
I don't know how. I think some of it was luck. I think I got lucky. It's never it's always heavy. See, when I start thinking about this, I get a little I lose my words, because it's also very clear to me that the life expectancy for trans women of color specifically is 30. That me, as a 34-year-old, I'm considered an elder in my community. And so for me, this work, the work that I do, the speaking that I do, is all in the hopes of instilling some kind of hope for that girl that I was, a curly-haired, Black and Native Hawaiian trans girl who was 12 years old, who didn't know that there was a possibility to dream, to live, to thrive, and move beyond survival. I think that for many years in my life, I was just surviving, and I made compromises in order to navigate space, in order to get to where I needed to go, to get to the next spot. And I think also, too, what also helped me was finding those semblances of light, whether that's through friendships, like my best friend Wendy, whether that's through a guidance counselor in my high school, Allison Colby, who advocated for me when I didn't have any energy or the resources as a 14-year-old trans girl to advocate for myself. And so I think that sometimes there's a lot of darkness, but I think that at certain times there's light that comes in, whether that's resources or friendships that help you get to the next space that you have to get to. But I wholly believe in something that Barbara Smith says, who's a Black feminist, revolutionary. She says that we need stories. We need more stories so that we can know that, number one, we're not alone, that we're not the first to have been there before, that someone else has made it out. And then the next layer, so that those stories then help us better live and better dream, and dream even bigger. And so the only reason why I do that work is largely because of that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And I also, I got a little, Cass's birthday is today? Someone named Cass? No? Was that, did someone make that up? Okay, someone's girlfriend told me to say happy birthday to them. So
Happy
if it's your birthday in the
Cass.
audience and you're seeing this.
I think this will be our last question.
Hi, Miss Janet.
Hi, boo-boo.
I'm Callie. As a trans woman, sometimes stepping into a cisgender space and having conversations with strangers, as soon as they discover your transness or whatever, the focus automatically tends to shift to your body parts. So my question would be, how do you artfully avoid the question or avoid answering that question?
How do you negate that one?
Rude or abrasive or obnoxious?
Well, some days I am rude and abrasive because that's just where I'm at that day. So it's completely fine to be rude and abrasive if that's where you're at that day. If that's your truth, live your truth. But I think most times it's oftentimes you're having to navigate around that. People think that I don't still have to deal with that. You know, when I go to a dinner party and my work is not the center and no one knows who I am, or something at a friend's house, people ask, like, what do you do for a living? You know, and I'm like, oh, you know, I'm a writer. And oh, what do you write? You know, I'm like, I write articles and books. Oh, what are your books are about? And because I'm not going to lie, I'm like, well, you know, about, you know, growing up as a trans girl. Oh my God, you're trans? I would have never known.
Amen, honey.
Oh my God, I would have never known. When did you transition? Did you go all the way? You know, just like, I'm like, then you become an object that they're fascinated with, and I'm just like, there is Google for you. That's something you're interested in. Like, I'm not, you know, I've written books about it, you know. So sometimes I'm really like, I can be like cheeky with it, which helps. I think humor helps. I think sometimes also using, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is using, you know, flipping the script on them. And I try to use it as a teaching moment. Whereas, you know, like, it's like, you know, if you're asking me if I've had surgery, I say, have you had any surgeries? You know, like, and so then people kind of realize, like, how ridiculous they're being. And most often, I think it also depends, my levels of tolerance and graciousness come from how deeply am I invested in this relationship going forward anyway. So if it's just someone you're, like, passing by who's asking these questions, it's kind of like none of your business. But if it's someone that you really want to, like, have a relationship with and be friends with, then you can kind of work that through with them. And you can figure out what your level of comfort is. But you can just say, you know, historically trans people are always reduced to their bodies, so I prefer not to answer those questions, but Google has pictures and words and stories and videos for you to engage with. If you want to learn more about, you know, sexual reassignment surgery, top surgery, it's all there for you.
Thank you, Miss Jen.
Thank you.
Well, Janet Mock, you are an absolute delight. Thank you for sharing your strength and your vulnerability, and thank you for your visibility. Folks, please welcome, or thank, rather, the wonderful Janet Mock.
Thank you.